Welcome to aminacademy.com. Let us do human anatomy and physiology. In that, let's discuss about transport of substances across the cell membrane, how it's happened. The structure of the plasma membrane provides it with the property of selective permeability, meaning that not all substances can cross it. Those that can do so in different ways depending on their size and characteristics. Now we'll discuss further about that. That is transport of substances across cell membrane. Substances move across the cell membrane through diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. We'll discuss one by one. First, diffusion. What is diffusion? This was described. Small molecules diffuse down their concentration gradient. Lipid soluble materials like oxygen, carbon dioxide, fatty acids, and steroids cross the membrane by dissolving in the lipid part of the membrane. Water soluble material, for example, sodium, potassium, and calcium, cross the membrane by passing through water filled channels. Now we'll discuss the diffusion. First, simple diffusion. Small non-charged molecules move from areas of high concentration to area of low concentration. This process is driven by the concentration gradient. What is osmosis? Water molecules move from a soluble of less negative water to balance the concentration of other substances. Osmosis is affected by temperature and concentration. Now, facilitated diffusion. What is that? This passive process is used by some substances that are unable to diffuse through the semi-permeable membrane, unaided. For example, glucose, amino acids. Specialized protein carriers molecules in the membrane have specific sites that attract and bind substances to be transferred like a lock on key mechanism. The carrier then changes its shape and deposits the substances on the other side of the membrane. The carrier sites are specific and can be used by only one substances. As there are a finite membrane number of carriers, there is a limit to the amount of a substance which can be transported at any time. This is known as the transport maximum. Now, osmosis. Osmosis is a passive movement of water down its concentration gradient towards equilibrium across a semi-permeable membrane and is explained now. Now we'll talk about facilitated diffusion. Molecules move from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration with the help of membrane protein. Channels, proteins from pores in the membrane that allows small molecules and ions to pass through. Carriers, protein bind molecules and change shape to move them. Active transport. What is active transport? This is the transport of substances up their concentration gradient uphill from lower to a higher concentration. Chemical energy is in the form of ATP, active transport, drives specialized protein carriers molecules that transports substances across the membrane in either directions. The carrier sites are specific and can be used by only one substances. Therefore, the rate at which a substance is transferred depends on the number of sites available. What is facilitated diffusion further? Later will do. Molecules move from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration with the help of membrane proteins. Channels proteins from pores in the membrane that allows small molecules and ions to pass through. Carrier protein bind molecules and changes shape to move them. Active transport, what is that? Substances move against their concentration gradient using chemical energy like ATP. This type of transport is often found in the small intestine wall and root hair cells. Next, passive transport diffusion. The passive transport diffusion is the movement of a molecule from the area of high concentration to area of the low concentration without using energy. It is the type of passive transport that occurs across a membrane. How it works? The concentration gradient, that the region of space where the concentration of a substance changes. Movement. Substances move down their concentration gradient from high to low concentration. No energy. Passive transport does not require the cell to use energy. It automatically happens. For example, gases. Gases O2 oxygen and carbon dioxide CO2 can diffuse across the plasma membrane. Hydrophobic molecules. Benzene can diffuse across the plasma membrane. Small polar molecules, that is water H2O, H2O and and ethanol can diffuse across the plasma membrane. Ammonia gas. When the when a bottle of ammonia is opened in a room, the ammonia gas diffuses from the bottle into the room. Like this, it's useful here. Factors that affect diffusion. What are the factors? First is temperature. Higher temperature increase the rate of diffusion. Solvent density. Denser solvent decrease the rate of diffusion. Other types of passive transport, osmosis and facilitated diffusion. Now, further, we will discuss about facilitated diffusion and osmosis. Facilitated diffusion and osmosis are both types of passive transport that move molecules across membranes. Facilitated diffusion uses proteins to move molecules, while osmosis moves water. Molecules move through a membrane from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. This process uses transport protein that are embedded in the cell membrane. It's also called carrier mediated osmosis. It's a selective process that only allows certain molecules and ions to pass through. It does not require energy. We talked about already about osmosis. Further detail in cells will do. Water molecules move through a semi-permeable membrane from a lower concentration to a higher concentration. It's a passive process that happens without any expenditure of energy. It's important for plants which take water and minerals from roots using osmosis. Comparison. Facilitated diffusion moves molecules through transport proteins. Osmosis moves water through a semi-permeable membrane. Both facilitated diffusion and osmosis are types of passive transport. What is sodium potassium pump? All cells possess this pump, which indirectly supports other transport mechanisms such as glucose uptake and is essential in maintaining the electrical gradient needed to generate action potentials in nerve and muscle cells. This active transport mechanism maintains the unequal concentration of sodium and potassium ions on either side of the plasma membrane. It may use up to 30% of cellular ATP energy requirement. Potassium levels are much higher inside the cell than outside. It is the principal intracellular caution. Sodium levels are much higher outside the cell than inside. It is the principal extracellular caution. The sodium potassium pump is an enzyme that moves sodium and potassium ions across the cell membrane. It is found in the membrane of cell animals, including cardiac muscle cells. How it functions: maintain concentration gradients. The pump maintains higher concentration of potassium inside cells and higher concentration of sodium outside cells. Generate action potential. The pump creates and maintains the concentration gradient of sodium and potassium, which are essential for generating action potentials. Controls neuron activity. The pump controls the intrinsic activities of neurons. How it works: the pump uses energy from ATP molecules to move sodium and potassium ions against their concentration gradients. For each ATP molecules used, the pump moves 3 sodium ions out of the cells and 2 potassium ions into the cell. The pump shape changes to create an opening towards the outside of the cell, allowing sodium to be released. The pump changes back to its original shape, releasing the potassium ions inside the cell. The importance of this: the sodium potassium pump plays a vital role in many physiological processes, including cardiac cell electrophysiology and osmotic equilibrium. Then, what is bulk transport? Transfer of particles too large to cross cell membranes occurs by pinocytosis, cell drinking. These particles are engulfed by extensions of the cytoplasm. Extrusion of water materials by the reverse process through the plasma membrane is called exocytosis. Now, what is the bulk transport? For the detail, bulk transport is the process of moving large quantities of materials into and out of a cell. It's a type of active transport that uses energy, that is ATP. Types of bulk transport: endocytosis, the process of bringing materials into the cell by engulfing them. There are several types of endocytosis, including phagocytosis, pinocytosis, and receptor mediated endocytosis. Exocytosis, the process of expelling materials out of the cell. This process is important for removing waste material and secreting cellular products. How bulk transport works: the cell's plasma membrane invaginates to form a pocket around the target particles. The pocket pinches off, creating an intracellular vesicles containing the particle. The vesicle travels to the fuses with the plasma membrane, spilling its content out of the cell. Examples of bulk transport: phagocytosis is a type of endocytosis that involves the cell's plasma membrane surrounding a macromolecule or even an entire cell. Receptor-mediated endocytosis is a type of endocytosis that removes low-density lipoprotein LDL from the blood. So far, we discussed about transports, some transports in human cells. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.